And then, I don't know, he changed the subject and he said to me, you know, I never asked you, what made you come to Kenya? And I said, well, it started with this young girl, and her name's Juruta Kiduwa, by the way. I sponsored her when I was very young. Do you know? I'm still trying to find her, so this is her name. And then there was silence.
Hello everyone, it's Jessie from Germany. In 2017, I was backpacking the world and I decided to make a stop in Kenya because I wanted to gain some volunteering experience in Nairobi. I came across Sumer Home through Facebook and I decided to apply as a volunteer in her organization Local Aid. I knew nothing about her, really. I didn't even listen to her dad's music, the late Assyrian singer Judge Home, and all I knew was that she's Assyrian and has been in Kenya for more than 10 years, which really made me trust her and have confidence in her. A couple weeks later, I found myself being picked up by Sumer at the airport, and as we drove in her Jeep on the highways of Kenya, I knew this would be different from anything that I had experienced so far. I really knew it would be life-changing. And I also saw zebras all over the place next to the highway, so I knew I totally made the right decision. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Sumer's life revolves around the struggles of street children and vulnerable women. They live on the streets of Nairobi, and with her local aid team, she's getting children off the streets and rehabilitating them. These kids do not even have the basic human rights, but with local aid, they get access to education and healthcare, and most importantly, a home, where they feel safe and loved. Listen to this interview and get to know Sumer as the incredible human she is, and the woman that not only changed my perception of things, but of many other people who had the chance to meet her. Lastly, support for this week's episode of the Assyrian podcast is brought to you by Tony Kalakorakis and the injury lawyers of Illinois and New York. If you know anyone that has been in a serious accident, please reach out to Tony Kalakorakis. Tony has been recognized as a top 40 lawyer and a rising star by Super Lawyers publication and has obtained multiple multi-million-dollar awards. Tony can be reached at injuryrights.com or 847-982-9516. And now, let's hear from Sumer. Awimbawa, awimbawa, awimbawa.
Can you sing it?
Yeah.
Go on.
In the jungle,
The mighty jungle
the lion
sleeps tonight. Clearly, I don't have the voice of my father's.
I'm gonna add this totally into the interview. So, before you were Sumer from Kenya, you had a life in Australia. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing as an Assyrian in Australia? Were you born there?
No, I was born in Syria, in Hasaka, in Taltamur, Khabur. I've never been back, unfortunately. Hopefully one day. I was born in Syria and migrated to Australia when I was 4 years old. So don't remember much, but special memories. I have some special memories, yeah. I have an older sister who lives in the UK and 2 brothers, yeah. Migrated with my older sister, my younger brother, and I have my youngest brother was born in Australia, so grew up in Sydney in Australia, went to school, finished my high school there, and I studied fine arts and fashion design, and then eventually made a career out of fashion design. So I was a fashion designer for 7 years.
Was that your passion?
Art was always my passion, and then I guess I began working in the retail sector when I was very young as well. So I think that exposure to the creativity behind clothing and that I always liked that. So I was given the opportunity to become a fashion designer from the experience that I've had in a retail store, in a fashion retail store.
As I mentioned in the intro, your dad was the famous Assyrian singer Judge Home, and also your uncle John did a lot of movies. So your family's legacy and the contribution to the Syrian nation impacted a lot of people, created beautiful childhood memories. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing that my father was able to create music that is, still enjoyed and appreciated till today. He had a way of creating music that was, surrounding around topics that were very deep and topics that Assyrians could really connect with. And I love the fact that he was, music could do that, and Assyrians really connected with his music because they, obviously many of them would understand where he was also coming from, having this journey from Syria to Australia, and how that was such a big change for him. But also, of course, our past. He has a song about Semele, and a lot of people would really be able to grieve through this song, would be able to heal through this song. So I think, I love the fact that his music did that for Syrians, and they appreciated his music because the amount of passion that would just go in to creating this, and the creative process was also very inspiring to see the amount of hours in his studio. And
did you visit him in the studio?
His studio was at the back of our house, so basically it's in my backyard. I would see this consistency and his devotion and his dedication to his work. You barely see him come out to get a meal, then going back in.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and then you could obviously, his music is just very deep, and the Syrian people could really connect to that. And I think, that's a beautiful thing.
I recently read an article by Nardin Sarkis about Warid Dishe, and he was mentioning how during that time, the topics that the movie is touching on, like, shame and honor and all of that stuff, and it wasn't like something that you would discuss at that time in our society, and your uncle really touched on those topics and caused, those movies were considered controversial.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, it's very controversial, and he has I guess a reputation for that. Not a negative one, it's a good one. To kind of just speak up about these issues, and somebody has to do it, right? I guess.
That's true.
And it's always nice, like I said, to make music, make art, make movies that people can relate to, because this was what Syrians would actually go through, dating a nakhraya or things like these kind of topics.
I want to touch a little bit about your fashion design background. How did your career, your job look like as a fashion designer?
So I was a retail assistant. I got promoted to be the buyer. So it began by the company employing me to buy all the products, buy all the items that would go into this retail shop. And then they decided to create their own brand, so have their own fashion line, and they promoted me to become the designer of this new line. So they weren't buying wholesaling items from other brands anymore. They decided that they'll make their own line. And so I remember the first day they came to me and they said, "Do you have a passport?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then it was great because I knew I would be able to travel. So from then on, I was in the creative process of actually designing various different clothing, men's, women's, accessories, belts, shoes, bags, and we'd actually have our factory in China. So I stayed and lived in China for quite some time. We'd have an apartment.
How long?
At some point, a month at a time, then travel back to Sydney, then go back. So
wow.
when we'd have to design you have to work a season ahead as a designer. So we travel to Europe and actually try to see the upcoming fashion trends. And once I've been inspired by all this, I would start the creative process of designing the designs. And then I'll travel to China to hand in these designs and sketches and all of the documents for that. And then they'll begin producing it in China. So I'd have to be there to actually do all the sampling and all that. So well, what it was my boss thought that it would be cheaper to just rent out an apartment in China rather than going there and
back and forth.
So that's why, because we had the apartment, we could stay at long periods of time at one time. So I'd stay there for a month and a half, 2 months sometimes, and just make sure that all the samples are set and ready to go and shipped to Australia.
How old were you? Because that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, it was quite amazing, having this opportunity to see so many countries at one time. In such a short time, but How old was I? Okay, so it must have been about, young, 23 or so.
Would you say it definitely shaped you as a person, like getting to know so many different cultures, traveling around, opening your horizon?
Most definitely. I think that's that's definitely a plus side to traveling, especially China. There's so many things when you travel, you come back and you just really get to appreciate what you have here. And I think gratitude and appreciation after you've seen different cultures and what they have, what they don't have, that really builds your character as well. And also just the way that people live and their way of being, the way that they think, it's different. And maybe you can, sometimes you learn a lot from their way of thinking and it helps you grow.
On your website of your organization, you wrote you toured around as a fashion designer and you had a wardrobe that most of the people would die for.
That's true.
So I can see you had a certain lifestyle and luxury. So if you have all that stuff, like, shouldn't you be happy and like satisfied with it? Like, why would you then go to Kenya where you live a completely different lifestyle?
Yeah, I think I was definitely very blessed to have of course, like I said, this wardrobe full of clothing, and basically if I designed a pair of shoe, I could have every color in that pair or design. But I don't think it made me completely happy. What it did was just satisfy my craving and my love for art, because that's what I feel about that experience. That it really allowed me to express my creativity, but it never fulfilled that deep need inside me to serve or to want to do more. I remember when I was also in year 4, next door to our public school was a facility for children with disabilities, and I went one day and I said, hey, can I volunteer here? I would like to, like in my lunch times, I could come over and I could maybe just feed them or whatever. So I've always at a very young age just felt a need to serve or just do something, to give back. So I did that, and that was my first memory of like how good do we feel as human beings when we are able to give a bit of our time. And so this is where my whole journey I guess began, to Kenya anyway. When I was 15 years old, I decided that I want to sponsor a little girl from Kenya because I just never really understood poverty. I used to watch the TV ads, and of course, there are those typical ads of, famine in Africa or just poverty in general. And I honestly did not understand. That's at that stage is when I used to ask some heavy questions to myself of why do we as people, as humanity, allow this to happen? And I know that we are capable of feeding like these children. We have enough food to be able to give. Why have we allowed this to happen? And I mean, that's quite young. I was still so young, and I just wanted to answer some of these questions I had in mind. So I had this opportunity because ads will come up about sponsoring this little girl, and I'm like, okay, this world is crazy. No one's doing anything. I have to do something, and this is my opportunity.
So there was an ad of a girl.
So it was an ad for. It was one of these organizations that allows you to sponsor a child in any of these developing countries, and you could sponsor for like $35 a month, and they would be given the money for food, education, and shelter, and so forth. And I took up that, and I began sponsoring this little girl called Juruda Kibiwot from Kenya, and I did that for several years.
How did you afford that as a 15 years old?
Oh yeah, so that's when I made the decision to first, before I sponsored her, I made the decision first to go and look for a job. And that's where my retail experience came from. That was when I first started working in a retail fashion store. So in Australia, the legal age of working is 15 years old. And I was lucky enough to go and apply for a job in just a retail store. And I told my mum, hey, I got the job and I'm going to take up this sponsorship for this girl. And that was, that's how it all started.
I can imagine, other 15 years old, they're more focused, probably buying them, stuff from themselves, and you just, Very inspiring.
It's funny you say that because just the other day I was thinking about how I don't ever remember going up to my mom and saying, Mom, can you buy me this? Can you buy me that? It was always this need of like, how can I give rather than what can I get? Like,
yeah.
I don't know, don't understand that part, but that was me.
And so you sponsored a girl from Kenya, and that was also how your connection to Kenya started. Did you then read more about it and then said, oh, I'm going to travel to Kenya, or how did that transition?
Oh no, so I took up the sponsorship. I sponsored her for many years, and honestly I became, well, first of all, what happened was after several years I got a letter saying that from the organization that I sponsored her from, saying you don't need to sponsor this child anymore. You've been able to not only support her but her whole family, and now she's moved from the rural area to the city, and this has been great. Would you like to sponsor another child? I mean, that was mind-blowing for me. My $35 a month was literally able to shape and change a whole child's life, and not just hers but her whole family. That was it just made me think, if I could do that with just $35, what more could I do? That's when I became insatiable about helping. I started reading biographies about like humanitarian causes, biographies on women or people that have gone through challenges in their own communities in these developed countries, and how they got themselves out. Just really inspiring things about how people from these places have made such dramatic changes in their own communities, and then again it needs to make me think, well, what can I do if they can do that? Watch documentaries, movies, read books. And
can you name a couple of people that inspired you?
From what, the
books? The biographies that you read.
Desert Flower. Well, books like this where they tell this personal experience of something they did not like in their own communities and want to change, and blown away by that. But again, this thing of I can do something, like I know I can, and it's being able to sponsor this girl, and we all could do something. And so anyway, what happened was
you got this letter, and you're still swimming home with a fashion designer in Australia.
Yeah. And then what changed were the moment where it just I think decided to just leave and travel to Kenya was when I was on a design flight. I was traveling from Sydney to China, and I watched a documentary on child soldiers, and that's really horrific, like what these children had to go through as child soldiers in Sudan. And it became like so difficult to watch. I would literally be crying. And this was me, from a younger age. I would watch these documentaries or read these books and just really feel so emotional about it. Like it just be able to cry.
Yeah.
And anyway, the flight attendants will come up. Are you all right? What's going on? I'm like, darling, just leave me alone. And I was just sitting with my boss, and we became quite close because we travel the world together, right? And I turned around to him, and after I watched the documentary, and I said, look, you are going to give me 2 weeks off, and I'm going to get off this plane and book my ticket to Kenya, and I'm going to do a volunteer program, okay? And he's just looking at me, because I said it with such certainty that he just looked at me.
And the crying face.
Yes, and the crying face and the angry, and he's like, okay, fine. So that was it. I got off. I opened up my laptop, booked the volunteer program, and within less than a few weeks, I was in Kenya. And ever since that day, making that decision, that's the way I've literally lived my life. Made decisions upon when something stirs my heart, and when I feel so inspired about something. I think this is what you call, having a calling, or being able to listen to who you really are. So many people want to do things and they just disregard it because it's not right, or it's not
secure.
Yeah, there's risks and there's fear. Fear is the biggest thing, right? And I honestly, ever since then, it's really shaped me because I was able to do it as well. I'm like, this is a way of living. Like I have a feeling in my heart, I want to do something, and I act upon it without fear and without any negative thoughts. And yeah.
So what happened next? You booked your flight and you...
Well, I was actually placed within a volunteer program. So that was to teach art to a primary school in a slum community in Kenya. And, I guess then I didn't really know what else I could offer. And I didn't want to just go there and do nothing and just see the poverty. I actually wanted to be productive and make, of course, a change. And so I was placed in a school, and that's when I got to understand the communities and what they're facing. I was placed in a school and I was teaching them art, but I was still very curious about more of the issues, not just, there was these schools that they didn't have 3 meals a day, and there was those issues that were surrounding education, but then I wanted to know more. So I asked the principal, hey, can you please take me out and take me around the community and tell me.
Show me the real deal.
Yeah, what's going on here? What are the issues? I feel compelled to help in some way, and I don't know where or how, but I just want to say, he introduced me to a lot of people. He introduced me to eventually the woman who I founded my organization with, and I met her, and she was working with women living with HIV AIDS, and how the community spoke about her, that she had been devoting 10 years of her time to work with these women, to empower them. Yeah, she literally devoted, again, these are the type of stories that I would literally read about back in Australia, about women that were in their own communities, barely having their own funding, but able to give back somehow. So she spent 10 years of her time volunteering in the community, changing women's lives. And I just was so inspired. And I said, listen, woman, I want to work with you and I want to help you do what you're doing. And I'm so glad I did that, actually, because I really hate this idea of NGOs coming in, these developed countries and trying to set up their own strategies and ideas and having solutions for issues they don't even don't know anything about. But anyway, so I was happy to found my organization with her. She was quite inspiring. So I was okay. So first of all, I did that volunteer program. Sorry, I'll just finish off that.
Yeah.
I went back to Australia, and I could not handle being back. Just to forget everything that I've just seen was just not possible. And I had also promised that lady that inspired me. I said, look, I'm going to come back and we can do something together, right? So
how long did you stay in Kenya?
the first time,
Yeah.
my volunteer program was just for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then I told her, I felt inspired from then on I didn't know how. I didn't even think that I'll be living in Kenya or going to give up my life in Australia or anything at that point. It was just, I want to help you. And she's probably thinking, oh, this, Mzungu, which means white person.
Mzungu.
This Mzungu is just, she's going to go back to Australia and forget all about us. But I didn't. I went back to Australia. I could not, my heart was not settled until I did more. So I just left and went back to Kenya. That woman, I said, hey, I'm here. I'm ready now. Would you like to, I want to establish an organization. Let's work together. And she was shocked. She was like, okay, there's some real ones. Because I assume she would think I would not come back, because there had been so many Westerners and foreigners coming in promising,
taking pictures and then leaving.
So
what I really appreciate is that you really want to make sure that the donation gets to the actual people, because most of the times you have those big organizations where you donate to and you just don't know what it happens, if it goes into, I don't know, advertisement or employee's car. So you really sometimes don't see the direct impact from this money. And you had that also with that girl. Did you ever actually meet the girl?
Yes, that's a very beautiful story, actually. To me, it's very personal and beautiful. So to answer your question, when I entered Kenya, the first thing I thought of was this little girl, because obviously when they told me that you don't need to sponsor her anymore, they didn't allow me access to continue actually communicating with her, which is quite strange. So imagine having all these years of writing together, pictures, and then all of a sudden it's just cut off. So then I went. Yeah, so when I decided I'm moving to Kenya and I'm gonna found this organization, I began looking for her. I looked for her everywhere for several years, like over 5-6 years. I tried calling the organization that I originally sponsored her from, and I said, I am looking for this girl, this was her name, I sponsored her in this year, and they said, I'm sorry, we don't hold records of that many years ago. And I was a bit disheartened, like, okay, great. That didn't work. I said, surely, in Kenya, once you name a few names, people will be able to find her. And that didn't work. I used social media. I tried, just posting. Does anybody know this name? Nothing. So, I don't like to say I gave up, but there was no hope, really, after so many years looking for her, And then after, I've established my NGO and set up some programs, and then I was compelled to do some work with animals, so conservation work in some of the wildlife parks there in Kenya, because I had worked with children, done all that work, but in somehow I have this strong connection with animals and just love for wildlife and wildlife protection and conservation. And so I began working with some rangers, rangers that the rangers that protect wildlife. And I was placed in this national park, and there's many national parks in Kenya. There's several of them. I chose this one because I was just, pulled to this one in particular. And I started working with these rangers for 1 week, and I got connected to one in particular, and we really formed, like, he showed me how they would come in and poach the animals, because you know how there's the act of like whether it's Chinese, whoever come in and start poaching and killing animals for their horns, for elephants, for their tusks, because it's like, you know, very valuable, and it'll just be all these issues. And I would like, okay, I'll see how I can help you with GPSs, this and that. And anyway, so we connected for a week, seeing how I could try to help these rangers. So I left the park, went back home in Kenya still. But I kept in contact with him, and I said, hey, how's it going down there? And he's like, yeah, everything's fine. And I said, you know what? I never met any female rangers. Do you have any female rangers working there? And he said, well, we do, but unfortunately when you were here, they were not there at the time. I said, oh, that's a shame. And then, I don't know, he changed the subject, and he said to me, well, you know, I never asked you, what made you come to Kenya? Like, and I said, well, it started with this young girl, and her name's Jiruto Kibiwot, by the way. Like, I sponsored her when I was very young. Do you know, I'm still trying to find her, so this is her name. And then there was silence. And I said, hello. And he's like, wow, one of the rangers that works here is Jiruto Kibiwot, the girl you're just talking about. And I was shocked and in disbelief, because I'm like, no, this ranger's telling a lie. I'm like, no, are you sure? I've got a picture of her, and I've kept it on my fridge, like up on my walls. And I took a picture of it, sent it by WhatsApp immediately. Now this girl, this picture she was very young when I first had it. And he said, yes, this is her. Like,
oh my God.
She's like,
I have goosebumps.
I was so shocked. I was like, how does this happen? Like, this is, and then, you know, screaming to my best friend, oh my God, I think I found her.
This cannot be a coincidence. This is divine energy,
intervention,
whatever.
Right?
Oh my God.
And then he said, yes. And not only that, she's here right now. Would you like to speak to her? And like, my heart was pounding, and then she got on the phone, sweet voice, but I was just like, hi, I've been looking for you for so long. It was honestly just such an amazing like moment in my life. Like, I just couldn't believe like how this happened. And of course, just quickly prepared myself. A day or two after that, I just packed my stuff and went to meet her. And it was this incredible woman who would come out with her gun, like, because she would have to protect wildlife, you know, that was her job. And I was like, wow, she's now inspiring me. Like, wow, what an incredible woman. We sat, had a tea, and just like, you know, shared stories. And it was, very...
How was her reaction when she saw you for the first
crying.
time?
I have a video of it. We were both like crying, and just, it was really beautiful. And she'll tell me more about her family. Ever since then, I would always, like, every time I'll take the kids, the ones in my organization, to the coast and let them enjoy, the summer at the coast side by the beach. I'll always bring her along. And so she's gotten to meet the kids from my work. And yeah, it's beautiful. It just goes to show to me that, you know, when you really follow your heart, what's meant to be is meant to be, and you will. Like, that was almost like a realization, acceptance from God, from universe, whoever you want to, you know, whoever you're more connected with, that you are on the right path, you know, and you'll always be on the right path when you do follow your heart. And it's just that synchronicity of that happening is very rare. It's not a coincidence. There are no coincidences in life. And so that's, if I take anything away from that, it's just like it taught me to keep following my heart, you know, because even before I chose to go and visit, to do this like wildlife conservation work, I was feeling a bit guilty inside, thinking, this is going to take away my time from serving the kids that I'm working with and these other programs. But I'm like, you know, of course, me being me, like, no, I have to listen to this. Like, I really want to do it. Yeah, the feeling in my heart. So I did it. And again, that was always also the answer, that everything was fine. If I wanted to do that, then you should go ahead with it.
That story just shows me how everything is connected. Like, you going to this retail, you know, trying to get money to support this girl, then this also impacts your career choice. And then it's just, wow.
Yeah, because again, like, honestly, there are hundreds of national parks. I could have gone and picked the main park, right? And she's literally on the other side of the country in another national park. I had to choose that park, and I had to speak to this ranger who's working directly with. It's incredible. Life can be incredible and magical. Actually, that is really the word that I can use. Life can be very magical if you just follow your heart.
Yeah. Just real quick, touching on that transition from Australia to Kenya. How did your family react and your friends? Like, did they say, "Oh, she's so crazy," or did they support you? Because it's a bold move. It's not just like, "Oh, I'm going to, I don't know, New Zealand." It's Kenya, completely different culture, environment. What do you say? Living standard.
I think, okay, so because it wasn't just like I woke up one day and said, I'm going to Kenya and I'm living there. That's it. I did the volunteer program. I came back. I shared my experiences. I shared photos. I did, told people the story. So they got a bit of connection to Kenya and me living there. And then I went back again. So it wasn't until the third time. I actually traveled like 3 times to Kenya, because after the second time, being very certain that I'm going back to build this organization, I still came back after a little while. And then that's when I kind of announced to everybody that, look, I'm... No, it kind of also happened gradually, but I said I'm going to be staying there this time for a longer time. So my mum was very, of course, mum being mum, was very worried. Like for many, I think for a couple of years, 2-3 years, while I talked to her on the phone, was always very worried. How is it there? Are you safe? Is it, all of it? What are you eating? Are you, where are you sleeping? All of these things. But it's really amazing and beautiful that now I'd say she's one of my greatest supporters, honestly. And she's done fundraisers for me, and she's really adapted that this is my life. And my friends, I feel I've been honestly very, very supportive. I don't know how other people feel about it, and I know that there's many people that would be like, why doesn't she just stay, and just get married, have kids, do the traditional
Exactly.
What is this life that she's living? No, that's definitely not for me. That's not. And no, I was very blessed to have family and friends that supported it. And every time I would, come back to tell stories or put on a charity dinner, they'd be there supporting. So I'm very thankful for that, actually. See, obviously, you do miss your family and friends. They miss me. We have to try and be in contact, even though. Especially I have, best friends. I've got I'm a godmother to one of my best friend's daughters. So all of these, it was difficult, but it never really weighed me down to the point where it was difficult for me to stay. I was so overwhelmed, and just by living my truth was just fulfilling, So it didn't really get to me that much. Some people might not be able to do it. They're just too much of a family person.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Or too much of a... No, I'm different, I guess.
Yeah, I also felt like when I was traveling the world, first of all, my mothers are mothers. Obviously, they're worried, but when you share a lot and you tell them, you're open about your experience, and you give them the feeling that you have a plan and you know what you're doing, they're more supportive. And now, she, at the beginning she said, you're gonna get killed, and now she's driving me to the airport. So, and you definitely need friends, I think, that are not so demanding and why don't you text me every day? Why don't you text me every second day? Because when you're away, it's really hard to keep up, you're not part of the daily life anymore, and to keep that bond is really hard. Did you struggle with that?
Yeah, I think it's always difficult. I have to come back and then catch up on everything. But I've also been this person. I'm a very solitude person. So even when I was in Australia, all my friendships they all kind of understood that I was this person that was a bit to myself, and they also, I would not be one to constantly be texting and having they all knew that Summer loves her space. So they adapted to me from the beginning of our friendship kind of thing. So when I moved, it was it's not so hard to not talk for a little while. I mean, you see, the thing is with long distance relationships and friendships, it's the love is there whether you know every day what's happening in their life or not. That's what that strong foundation is, that you love and respect each other, and you're going to see each other soon, and then you can connect again. It's not a must to know everything about your friends constantly, really. Unless, of course, there's a need like this. You need some support, you need healing, you need to talk about something, but everyone's individual, must live their own life and go out searching and making themselves happy and fulfilled.
Yeah. And I think that's even the best friendship, that when you don't talk for a year, you just pick up on the conversation that you just had a year ago, and it's the same feeling and no hard feelings, all good,
That's when you're right. That's when it's a real friendship, because you respect, you're not so needy, that you need to give me all of this for me to be your friend, all this time I need. That's the way I like to have friendships anyway.
Yeah. One of our co-hosts asked the question, how do you define the word home? Like, what does it mean to you?
That question is really interesting because for me, it transcends and it's more far reaching than just my traditional family life, which of course I do feel at home when I'm in Australia. Who doesn't feel at home when they're around their mother, right? But for me, I've always been a soul searcher, and meaning that I'm always searching for a place and experiences that make me feel like it make me understand and learn about myself more, and that's when I really feel at home. So in a way, going out there and exploring, being a part of a global family of the natural world and how I fit into this world, because it's now more an expansive kind of home for me. It's not my home that I live in this geographic little area with my own family, you know. And I think that's where experiencing and looking at a home in that more like transcendental, like more expansive way allows you to be able to connect to more cultures and learn from them and appreciate them, and you grow. And I think that's where I feel more at home, when I'm kind of like feeling that I can be free, having the freedom to explore, connect to people. It's a wonderful feeling, I think. And it's very important. I think home should really be about home within, like how do you feel within yourself. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, whether it's unfortunate, even if you're within a home, like that's why my point is of being at home in a, you know, traditional home family. If you're not comfortable within or at home within, because you're needing something more, but you're still staying there, that's not really home to me. You know, home is going out there and listening to that and fulfilling that. Then you feel relaxed and you're at peace and you found freedom in yourself. Like that's again that feeling of safety and reassurance that you are who you are and you know who you are.
Yeah. 3.5 years ago when I met you, and I was still like young and like exploring, like very. I was telling you how you live a very unconventional life as an Assyrian. Obviously today my opinion is different because there are not just one way how to be Assyrian. But and you said this is your normal way of living, like that's for you conventional.
I guess in a way, because I feel like the normal that we live in, like let's say at least in Australia, in the Western kind of culture and life, that's not normal to me, because that's more a robotic, systematic kind of lifestyle that we're forced to grow up into without making our own choices of what we want with our lives, right? And I think being unconventional, of course, you have to be very fearless, and I can't live any other way, because that's what really brings me so much peace and evolving as a person. And I yearn for that more and more. Like I don't yearn to be settled into a society or yearn to fit in or anything. I want to go out there and do what someone's never done. I want to go and explore life, and because I know that's where I'm really going to grow. How much can you evolve as a person if you're just going to fit into a little box or be part of a system? That's, I don't know. I'm like, of course I'm saying that, and many people might think, oh wow, that's a bit bold or wild, you know, because it's also beautiful to have a family, grow up, have a job, have a stability, have a family, and of course I'll probably yearn for that, you know, but just not in the way that it's done in the Western lifestyle. Yeah.
It's funny because I had an interview also with Ashok Kasarani, and I asked him the same question and he answered it the same way as you. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the actual organization that we're always mentioning but not really talking about. You're the founder of the humanitarian aid organization Local Aid in Kenya. Tell me a little bit more about your organization. Yeah, you already touched on how it started, like though, like how did you, you're in Kenya now, how do you start an organization, and what are you really focusing on?
Okay, so basically Local Aid is an organization that empowers vulnerable children and the marginalized community, and we really try to make an impact in the areas of education, empowerment, health, and we've been working in these sectors for several years anyway. So we've built a children's home for former street children to provide safety and education to them. We've rescued over 80 kids off the streets. So that's our kind of educational street child program. And then we have the health clinic where we are serving the community with affordable and accessible healthcare, because in that community that healthcare is just non-existent really, or they do, and it's like private clinics and they're just very expensive and the community just can't afford it. And then of course women's empowerment, which is to economically uplift women from these low-income communities. So we have quite a few sectors, but I really, these last few years wanted to narrow it down and just focus on one or two sectors. So at the moment, we've kind of passed on the clinic to the local community, and they've taken it over as a community clinic. And I guess that was also my vision anyway. Eventually, when I ever leave, it's always to pass it over to locals so they can continue on the work.
Definitely, it shouldn't be dependent on you.
Foreign aid, no, definitely. And my ideas of charity have changed so much over the 12 years that I've been living there. But we still have we have the program for the kids still running. We have support that comes in to sponsor these children. We go out there and just kind of find kids that are living on the streets and rescue them, rehabilitate, and find a safe home that they can, or our home, or a boarding school that they could get an education and live in.
When we went together to this art program for street children, I met kids that were still living on the street at that time, and they were high on glue. And can you talk a little bit more about in what kind of conditions street children must live in Kenya? Why are they high on glue? How do they get the glue?
So what happens is that kids end up on the streets in Kenya when they're either orphaned, they run to the streets, or they are living with a single mother that obviously they cannot afford, because there's low-income communities, it's slum communities, there's no jobs, so the mother cannot look after her child, or the father is an alcoholic and doesn't, that's the only kind of guardian that the child has, is an alcoholic father, or a mother that cannot provide, or an auntie or a grandmother is just living in poverty. So there's no way. And the child thinks, if I run to the streets, at least I can pick at the garbage, I'll eat something. Like this home does not provide me with any education or food, and so it's going out looking for greener pastures basically, and it's definitely not greener pastures out there, because it's honestly a tough life. So they follow these other street kids and they get adopted in these groups, and each area has their own groups, and they live in the most horrific conditions I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you've seen it also. So honestly, sometimes even gunned down by police. They have no access to food or water, and they're literally picking out of garbage bins, from the markets whenever food's left over on the floor. And what they're doing is they go to a shoemaker who uses glue to fix their shoes, just a local shoemaker, and whatever they beg for money, right? So if somebody's going to give them 5-10 cents, they go to the shoemaker, they pay for that glue, because once they get that glue, they sniff the glue, it numbs their pain of hunger, their pain of the cold, the pain of just being lonely, and the trauma that they face on the street. It numbs everything, just like any other, like most drugs do, right? It's a stimulant to make you feel better and more able to adapt in that kind of horrific environment. They do that, and some people have asked me, if they beg, why don't they just buy food? Of course, if you beg and you've got are able to raise enough money, you go buy yourself food. But most of the time, the scenario is that they will get only a few, 5-10 shillings. And if they sniff the glue, they are able to go out the whole day without eating, because it's numbing them. They're numbing their whole body, right? So people, criticize the kids because they're begging, they should buy food. It's not the case.
It's a cycle.
Yeah, it's definitely a cycle. It's horrific. They get gunned down by police. The community thinks they call them scavengers, literally the translation of chokras, which is what the community calls them. And
dirty
scavengers is just like rats. When rats scavenge for like things,
like garbage and stuff.
Like rubbish,
man.
basically like rubbish. So you're a child that's growing up. Honestly, your basic human rights are
non-existent.
Just definitely non-existent, and it's from food to education to healthcare to love to anything. That's why I always say that I believe street children are the most vulnerable children on earth. There's so many other traumatic or experiences or events that happen in other children's life, but this definitely has to be the worst because it's everything. It's hunger, it's being raped, it's being killed, it's been witnessing they're poisoned to death by their own community members. There are mothers sometimes that they get so sick of these kids begging that they'll give them a bread, put poison in it, feed it to the child, and literally the street children would be there. This child would be frothing from the mouth, dying, and his friends are watching him die. That's the life. I mean, when I first witnessed this, I had a group of 50 of them when I first was introduced to kids, and it happened because it was my first year in Kenya, and it was Christmas time, and I was like, wow, I really need to do something. I see all these kids on the streets. I want to learn about their stories, what's happening. In my eagerness to always learn about issues, they were always like, what's happening here, all these kids. So I finally got a friend to help me fill up a van full of food and drinks and just Christmas clothing and stuff, and go out there and meet these kids. And I was absolutely torn, heartbroken. That was probably the most depressing time like that I've ever had to face, to sit here listening to all these stories that happen to kids that like I could see are literally 5, 6, they would be as old as, of course, 17, 18, but that's the dangerous part because then they become honestly like thugs. That's their life. They don't know any other way, and I don't think it's fair even to judge them because what other way did they really have?
Of course.
But
how do you communicate with them? Like they talk Swahili?
The official language is Swahili and English, so they learn that in school, and they've even though many have not gone to school, so it was hard at some time. But I also learned Swahili, so I would communicate in Swahili with them, which is their official language. Because some would go to school for a few years, and all of a sudden the mother died, and the father had to marry another woman, and that stepmother would barely
abandon the child.
They should care more for their own children, so they feel it's very unfair, so they run to the streets. And that's why maybe some have had 1 year, 2 years of experience of educational experience, but other than that, many could not speak, and I was speaking Swahili. But that blew my mind. I could not believe it, and I said to them all then and there, I'm going to do anything I can to help you because this is not right. I couldn't walk away. I could how do you watch this and how does anyone get to experience this right in front of their eyes and walk away and pretend that's not part of their world anymore? You can't, it's not something you can unknow. I knew it, and I could not live with not doing something to help them. So
there's a whole lack of empathy and just like how the society works there.
It becomes, you become sensitized to watching these. They're like what they would call them sometimes is the wallpaper of Nairobi. Nairobi is the main city in Kenya, so it's like just you're sensitized. It's just the background to them. These kids are just living on the street, sleeping. People will go past.
But they're also struggling. Like they're all struggling. Course. So everybody's struggling, and because they're struggling, you cannot help others.
Yeah, I don't mind that part. I totally understand that part. My communication to the community, what I was always advocating is at least don't make their life more difficult. Don't run them down. Don't poison them. Don't treat them. Sometimes what they want is love. Sometimes all they want is just someone to talk to. Come with a book. You don't even need any money. Come with a book and read them something. Honestly, I remember when they used to tell me, Summer, you can come and feed us. Yes, it's beautiful. It's amazing. But please, can you take us to school? We want to learn. We want to get out of this situation. They were the ones who mostly inspired me to set up all these programs. Of course, I knew that they needed an education, and I had begun that. But it was lovely to see that they just don't want me to come and just feed them and go. They want a way out. Basically, what we do, for my work, we go out onto the streets and we start to build trust. So it takes like a few weeks before they get to know who I am on my team. But after many years, many of the kids know who I am. So there was particular kids that I was working on to get to the home. So, we have to get them to trust us while they're still on the streets, feed them while they're still on the streets, and then tell them, look, would you like to go to school? Or we have a home, you could come and we have all these services for you. So there was a couple that we were still in that process of trying to admit him into the home. So we promised that we're going to give him an education and all that. So he was still living on the streets. There was 2 of them. Now, these 2 were part of 6 boys that one day went and stole water from a supermarket, a very local supermarket. And theft in Kenya is not taken lightly, but to thieves, like actual thieves, they will kill them immediately because they're just so sick of thugs running around and stealing from community members. So what they'll do, if you steal something, you kill them. But in this scenario, what happened was the community members I mean, they could see that they were young kids. And what they did was they took them all, because they stole the water, they were caught. They took them all and put them in a room, and literally with wood shanks and steel bars and any like material that they had around them, you know, just really rough material, and slaughtered them to death. I mean, just beat them and beat them and beat them, 6 of them, until they literally died in a room. If you see this room, it was so horrific.
Did you see their room?
Like, yeah, I've seen the whole walls were full of blood, like just blood, and you just think to yourself, these innocent children, and especially knowing 2 of them that I was trying to work on, literally take to school, and this is, why did they didn't deserve to die like that, you
for
know?
Water.
And that's the worst part, that you guys are not serious. They were stealing water. This was a need to feel a thirst, not to steal. If they wanted to steal and something that was valuable, they would steal a phone or whatever, that's a crime or whatever. Even being a child is, you know, these are street kids. I wouldn't really call it a crime anyway, but still, it was water. They were thirsty. It was honestly the most devastating thing to experience, and I was very vocal about it, honestly. I really wanted justice for these kids, so I tried to just speak up that it's all our responsibility. That's where more people got to hear about what my work was, because we put it in the paper about this is not right. This is all our responsibility to protect these children against this. They do not deserve to die. Who's going to take up like responsibility for this? Like, it was horrible.
So you're not only serving the children, you're also being vocal about it, addressing the issues to the politics, to the community, trying to raise awareness about that.
Of course, most definitely. I think we found that, you know, changing policies is very crucial to the issue of street children, because it's an actual. First of all, this is really ridiculous, but it's against the law to be a street child in Kenya. So just imagine that life. It's definitely not their choice, is it? When you commit a crime, you've chosen to commit that crime. How is it that a child that's on the street, not by their own choice, but by force, because that was their unfortunate circumstances, they ended up on the streets, and now that's against the law. So, which means this is just, to me, what this is a way of the authorities, the police, to get away with beating them to death, to get away with slaughtering them, to get away of abusing them, and, you know, if they have that law in place, really. Because, I mean, there's so much politics behind street children, it's disgusting. Sometimes the government will even round up many of them. When it's the political time, they will just use them for political movements, so just for numbers and votes. And so they would literally collect them all, put them on a truck, behind a truck, send them to a place, and make them all vote, and we'll probably kill them all. Like, you'll never hear of these kids that were taken. They'll promise them that really we're going to come and take you to a government institution, we're going to protect you, but really what they want is numbers. I mean, this is very controversial. Like, it's not spoken about much, but I know that this happens. There's just
so many issues.
I'd be talking all day about how horrific their lives are, and
that could be like a five episodes.
Exactly. Every day of the street child, which is always on the 12th of April, we always do a march or a walk to raise awareness, to advocate for the rights of street children. Yeah.
I remember this kid showing me his ID that he just recently got. He was like, "Look, I have an ID now, like a identification card." Yeah. And that's when I truly understood. Before, you're nobody.
Yeah,
And if you're nobody, if something happens to you, you're invisible. Nobody will care what happens to you. So he was so happy to have this ID card because he's somebody now.
Of course, yeah, that's very important to them. And you're so right. They are invisible. There's an actual very large organization called Invisible Children, and this is what it focuses around, the identity of street children and how they can work on making these kids feel like they belong into society, into family, into these people. These children are members of society. In fact, it really, for me, my main thing is you cannot push this issue of street children to a side, because it's going to come and bite you in the end. These kids are the future. If they're not educated, they are going to turn into thugs. They have no other way. So what happens to your security in your own communities? It becomes a security issue. You all complain about being robbed and, it's unsafe in these communities. We'll make it safe by making sure that these kids do not end up to be criminals and thugs. So I don't like it when the locals just complain about safety, because I don't think they do enough. I mean, not just
They don't go to the root of the problem.
Yeah, they don't get to the root of the problem, exactly. And I get them educated, get them off the streets, and you'll see how a community has changed. So it really interrelates into other poverty issues of the country, and that's why I feel like, hey, you guys, okay, if you don't care about them, but just know that it's also going to impact you. So let's do something. Is that not enough for you to get up and make a change? Change the environment around street children.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the New Horizon family. That it's a building, like a home for these kids. How many kids are in this home?
Yeah, in the beginning we had like a large number, but because we've been able to educate, and many of them have grown up. It's been 12 years. Some have actually completed schooling and have gone on to university and work. But basically the home provides shelter, food, education, healthcare, recreational trips, and just basic needs for a child, and hopefully a little bit more spirituality, because by church, and we have some counseling sessions for them. There's been a lot of traumatic experiences that they've gone through.
Of course.
So the numbers, I cannot ever say, like, they're always up and down, because we admit some children are finished standard 8, which is public school. So what happens with our home, once the child reaches standard 8, we take them out and put them in boarding school, which enables us to have more room in the home to rescue the younger ones. Those are the ones we focus on. In the beginning, I was a bit like, I need to help them more, but then we actually, put in systems, put in some strategies, which now we go by, that we cater to. When we go out there and look for kids living on the streets, we focus on the young ones, and then that way that we make sure, because once you're traumatized when you're young, you can never really take that back. It's hard, like you're going to mentally suffer for the rest of your life. So we try to avoid kids going through any traumatic experiences on the streets, which means that let's get them when they're young and try to have a safe haven for them before that gets messy. So basically, we recruit and rescue younger ones, and they go to a nearby public school. And all the ones that have graduated from that home into secondary school, they're all placed in high schools and in boarding schools all over the world. Boarding school is great because they can have the shelter and the food and education all at once, and we pay for the boarding school. Wow. We cover that,
I only noticed boys in the home. Why do you only have boys that you rescue?
First, for a few reasons. Firstly, there's a larger number of boys. There's still girls, definitely, and their cases are even more horrific. Right. We do have a couple of girls in our program, but not living at the home, right? We've supported them off the streets and just like supported them through boarding school, primary school, So the boys are, because that's the majority of kids that you see on the streets, they form large groups, and the girls are also very hard to find, because they're not so... It's not so easy to find them out on the streets. They'll come out mainly at night, and it's very sad, because then they'd have to have to prostitute themselves to be able to survive. Anyway, so the basic thing was that there was definitely more boys that were out on the streets and suffering, and also more critical is that our home doesn't have the facilities to cater for both boys and girls, because it's just this one. I've always dreamt I would love to have facilities, but it would have to be like this dorm, or this kind of home has the boys, and this side would have the girls.
You can't mix them.
Either that, or I had this right environment where there was like a kind of a mother for each home, and there was boys and girls that are each mother that could live in one home of a family of 5, like in a family environment. But you've seen my home, it's just like 3 main dorms, and we keep them all in that one space, because that's all I have access to. I'd love to raise more funds and have an actual proper village for these children, and be able to recruit and rescue girls as well. But at the moment, that's basically, it won't work. You have boys, you have girls, there's going to be babies in future, in a few years' time. You'll have to also have, you don't know what could happen, you don't want to get in a situation where they're now having kids, and at the end of the day, they're still rescued from the streets. So there's a lot of education that they need, and
So when I was there, I also met one of those mamas that you were talking about. Her name was Gladys. Are these mamas also, they lived on the streets, and then you recruit them to be the mama of those street children, or where do you get them?
Oh no. So what would happen is that within my organization, I really like to support and uplift economically some especially women, you know, because then I could really reverse the cycle of kids ending up on the street. So she had kids, and these women would just, no, they live in the community, but in very low income communities. I mean, their house barely has anything, and she was a single mother, 2 kids. And when I learned of her story, I was just like, wow.
What's her story?
So her story was that she was cooking some food. Actually, she was making, because that's what she used to do. Her job was cooking fish, so frying fish and selling fish to the community. And the jobs that they have as mamas are very simple, but that's how they get by, right? So just she was boiling the fish in oil one day, and what happened is it caught on fire and her whole body got burned. So she was like all completely burnt, and I think it even like there was just a lot of fire all around, and she could not put the fire out, and she was burnt, 3rd-degree burns, like very badly burnt. Honestly, her husband did not even help her out. Like, even as that was happening, he just like left her. She had 2 kids now, imagine, who were left there, but she had to go to hospital. Stayed in hospital for so long, they had to keep her, but she had no money to pay for the hospital bill. She also, she could not move for more than 6 months, 7 months, you know, and the kids have to kind of try to support themselves. I don't even know how they managed these 2 poor young girls. They were very young. And the saddest thing is she actually had to get herself out of hospital, and without the doctor's approval, but she's like, I have to get out so I could continue to feed my children. I have no other way. So the healing that she had, maybe when you see in her body, I don't know if I showed you some parts, they were not fully healed, because she didn't, number one, I didn't even know till this day how they actually let her out of the hospital, because when I hired her, I was helping her also pay off some of the hospital bills that she had for a long time. Like, that was part of the contribution, that she would work, and then I would also commit some amount to paying off that hospital bill. But the worst part was just like, imagine, you know, not being able to heal from it, your pain, you don't have any income anymore. So it was a lot of suffering that the woman went through. And basically, you know, it would have been great to have like a social worker who was very educated and, you know, the perfect mother for the home. But at this point, she was a mother, and this has been many years, obviously, when I met her. So she was healed from her burns, but just her story was still that she had this hospital bill, and she was still was struggling for her children. Yeah. So we hired her, and beautiful. She was a great mother for many years. She was like more, obviously she didn't do the social side. Well, being a mother, she did anyway, but she was responsible to cook and clean the facility for the kids. So we basically, that was what I could do to help give her a job and pay for her hospital bill.
Beautiful. When I checked your social media, I saw a video of a woman sitting in a workshop and working on jewelry. What was that about?
So Tribirth is one of our latest projects. It has its own entity now because it's a social enterprise, more of a business setup where we employ and empower stigmatized women, so women living with HIV, AIDS and single mothers, to produce ethical jewelry made in a very sustainable way using locally recycled materials, recycled metals, gemstones, not recycled gemstones, but recycled and brass, which is what we make the jewelry from, and silver. And we have tried to make the workshop as sustainable as possible. And in this way, it will be able to economically support these women, stigmatized women from the communities, but also it was a way for me to set up a fundraising arm to support local AIDS projects. I'm still trying to build that, so it's like really, you know, businesses generally will take some years to kick off, but we've taught the women in various disciplines of jewelry making. They know how to set stones, they know how to create all the designs that I design and they create the jewelry. We have the machines set up there. We had donors that invested in buying machines for them. So we have a fully functional running sustainable jewelry workshop, and these women create really beautiful pieces. It's been a struggle throughout this Corona time, of course, you know, having a business, especially a startup, has been a bit challenging, but I feel it's really important because I just want to work on more sustainable projects in Africa, in Kenya at least. I believe that that's really the root cause, and we can prevent all of these issues of street kids and, you know, other issues of, most poverty related issues are mostly from unemployment, from not having opportunities to work and to provide healthcare, education, food for your kids. All of this could be really solved by just the unemployment rate in Kenya is over 40% now. You could imagine how that would impact a country. And so I think, and I believe we have to look at Africa and all these developing countries in a totally different way. If I've learned anything over my 12 years of doing work in these underdeveloped countries, it's like, okay, let's not look at Africa as being poor. Of course they have those issues, but those issues are because we also don't help to change it sustainably. We help just to really put a band-aid over by sending over food and foreign aid. And for me, it's like, no, they have abundance of resources. How do we take these resources and make them rich from it, make them gain employment and gain resources of their own through these materials? And that's why I love working with their own materials, like the gemstones. I mean, Africa, Kenya in general has an abundance of beautiful gemstones that could be turned into beautiful products like the jewelry and could be put. They have so many materials that we can say, okay, how can they help themselves with their own resources? And that's the angle that I'm looking at in terms of charity now. It's not a way of looking like, oh, they need us to help them. No. Yeah, no, I definitely feel that it's just, I don't feel comfortable anymore working in the sector of let's just give food, because that hasn't helped for many years. A lot of the larger NGOs, and I don't have to name names, but we all know they don't really change much, because they need these issues to remain in these communities so they can still have a job. Yeah. Basically. And if all these issues were changed, then we wouldn't be able to exploit countries like Congo and other countries that without their resources, this world would not even be able to operate. Like I was saying, your laptops, your computer, your phones, everything comes from resources from and minerals, and so much more comes from this country alone, Congo. So I think that's not fair. We just need to keep that resources in Africa and help them be able to profit from their own rather than exploit them from the resources.
Fun fact though, speaking of cycle and everything's connected. So Sumer, being the fashion designer, designing in Australia, then going to Kenya, helping street children, and now you're back in designing. It's such a nice, you really use all the skills that you learned during your life. You use them in the different environments that you're facing. I really love that. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, I think what's happened is for many years, even while I was in Kenya and I had the children's home, I had the health clinic, at the back of my mind, I always knew I need to use my skills that I've learned in Australia, my art skills and fashion skills and all that. I can't just let that go to waste. I know that could empower some women here. I just never had the time, because building an organization, and of course it's not easy in all these different programs, and it's just such a small organization, trying to fundraise as well, write proposals. It's just very demanding, and my time was very limited. I knew at the back of my mind that if I was to reverse time and go in, the first thing I would do was set up a social enterprise, a business first that could support any projects I begin, because then I'm not going to struggle forever trying to find funding. And that's what it's basically been like for me for several years. But yeah, it's really beautiful. I think that I can use art now, and which is another one of my great passions, and together with serving and doing humanitarian work, those two are like a beautiful marriage that I'm exploring now.
Very romantic. Okay, so back in Kenya, there's one thing that is always in the back of my mind. You told me that networking is the key to everything. Without networking, you wouldn't be able to do the work that you're doing now. And in fact, you struggled so much at the beginning, because you didn't have any connections to people and like donors, that you reached a low point and had to leave Kenya and spend time in Dubai.
What happened was it was a couple of years into the work that I was doing, and it was still very difficult for me because I didn't have, again, this large team and a lot of funding coming through.